So we're basically 24 hours out from the ridiculous ending to the Austrian Grand Prix, where we had Max Verstappen and Lando Norris colliding together in the closing stages of the race after having an intense battle throughout the final portions of that event. Now, I am not a fan of neither Verstappen nor Norris, nor of either teams. I don't really support any team, so I feel I have a very unbiased and generalized viewpoint on this incident as it is, but also on the overall way in which Max Verstappen goes about his racing, but also how drivers have to go about racing Max Verstappen. And we also have to talk about Lando Norris's lack of self-belief and self-confidence in himself. It's something I think we can all quite easily admit to. He has that within himself. He's very lacking with it. But there's a few things we also need to take outside of this particular event, and it's all the other precedents that have come before with not only Verstappen, but with this particular track and this particular corner in this Austrian Grand Prix track at the Red Bull Ring. And Max Verstappen has been on the other end of things as well. But before we get into the Norris v Verstappen battle yesterday at this turn 2, I want to go over this corner in itself. So there is obviously, like with every corner, two ways in which you can make an overtake, either on the outside or the inside. Now, with this being a right-hand corner, the majority of overtakes are going to be done from the inside of that corner, not the outside. And what this enables you to do is to have as clear a direction and exit that you can get out of it, of course, because we have a long straight. And it makes sure that the opponent you're overtaking is on the power later than you, and he's going to have to make that much more of an effort to get the overtake done back on you, regardless of whether he's got the slipstream and DRS. And you also, if you're on the inside, you can squeeze your opponent ever so slightly to make sure they don't have a good exit out of it. Now, that's how I would potentially do an overtake. And we have a very real life example of Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. Vettel takes Hamilton on the inside, he squeezes him, makes sure Hamilton cannot get on the power as quick as he can, and he has a weaker exit because of how much he squeezed him. And this enables Vettel to get away from Hamilton with his superior traction. Now, on the other end of this, we have an overtake of Verstappen on one of the Ferraris in 2022. Now, he chooses to take the outside line, the outside of that corner, and he's squeezed by the Ferrari. But what he does here is he makes sure his both front and rear left wheels are outside of the track, making sure contact does not happen. And as we all know, in the rule book, you only have to have two wheels on the actual track to still be within the technical regulations. So nothing wrong with it. Then the Ferrari runs deep and he's able to kind of go from underneath him with his superior traction and get the overtake done. So this is the way in which you can make two overtakes, and what potentially always happens at this corner. Now we can turn our attention to the race at the weekend and how Verstappen and Norris were trying to go about both attacking and defending turn 2. So to begin with, before we get to the main event of the collision between the two, we have to look at all the previous instances of Norris trying to make the overtake on Verstappen into that corner. And he starts off with a couple of half-hearted lunges, and Verstappen kind of just easily slaps the moves away and retains the lead. And then Norris has this one move where he's completely over the edge and has got no control over the MCL38. And Verstappen basically has to not turn into the corner and just allow Norris to sort it out and figure it out at the apex of there. Now, for me, this is saying a couple of things. One, by the time we get to the movement where Lando is obviously going to get the contact with Verstappen, he's gotten not only frustrated probably under the visor with him saying Verstappen is moving and braking, but secondly, and more importantly than that, I feel he's lost the self-belief and confidence within himself to make the overtake because he's had so many attempts at it. Now, let's actually get to the main event. So we have to compartmentalize this particular overtake and not look at anything previously that Verstappen has done, because I personally don't think he's the same driver he was in 2021, even if some of the news articles out there stating he is. For me, Verstappen has a different mindset, and it's into this corner here. Now, with all the experience he's had of previous races at this track and having reel-to-reel battles with different opponents, and he himself being squeezed here and him not having an issue with it, he feels he's in his rights, as he is being the defending leader of the race, to defend his position and to defend it hard but in a fair manner in which he does. So he gives Norris the room on the outside to go down, which he does, and then he does what happened to him at the hands of the Ferrari, which he squeezes Norris. And I think from Verstappen's viewpoint, he's expecting Norris to do what he did in that situation and take a couple of his left wheels outside of the track to ensure that they don't have any contact. And from there, they will sort it out with one another. Now, unfortunately, Norris doesn't move and doesn't see or kind of preempt the fact Verstappen is going to do this particular move. And this comes from, I would say, a lack of understanding of what Verstappen is about and how he defends. And so we get the contact. Now we have to get to the one part of this whole situation in which I feel Verstappen was absolutely crazy. And that's literally driving Norris off the track on the straight before we get to turn 3. That to me is a man that's lost his head and just doesn't care about the rules and the standard by which you have to drive and respect your competitors. And there's no excuse for that. That's the one move in which I feel Verstappen has gone far and beyond the line. And he even continues to take that into turn 3. He won't let Norris through. And I think that's the actual moment which no one is talking about, from which Verstappen deserves a much harsher penalty than he got. The actual contact between the two drivers is basically nothing. It's an unfortunate racing situation between two rivals that haven't had the same experience with one another in that certain duel. Now, I would actually hand Verstappen a really harsh penalty, and I don't know what the precedence is for it. I think at the bare minimum for that, he needs a qualifying ban. I don't think it's a race ban because there is no contact and there's all of the other kind of things still surrounding that situation. So I think a qualifying ban for Silverstone would have been the appropriate punishment for his complete and absolute mental breakdown after the contact between the two drivers, because you cannot do that. So that's where I stand on what's happened in this Austrian Grand Prix weekend. Now, having said all of that, if this was Verstappen v Leclerc, I think we have a completely different outcome, and here's why. Now, say, if in the past we've seen Charles Leclerc race Max Verstappen, it's one move, one overtake, he gets it done. Verstappen is very respectful of that. Yes, he goes to the edge in trying to defend, as we've seen on this particular track between those two drivers. But more than likely, in this situation yesterday, Leclerc makes one move, gets the overtake done, and we move on. And then perhaps Verstappen has the ability to come back at Leclerc in the next DRS zone, because of course from turn 3 into turn 4 there's that DRS straight before we get into the twisty fast speed corners in the middle sector. And these are the things Norris is just beginning to learn and understand about what it's like to race Verstappen and how you have to race him. You are in a similar category of how you'd have to race Michael Schumacher. You don't show him the move you're going to do. You don't rehearse it. You have to almost do it mentally before you do it. And then the first time you have the ability and the opportunity to do so, when you feel is the right moment, send it with full commitment. Don't let him have a chance to come back at you. And Norris had such a massive speed advantage over the combination of Verstappen and the RB20 at that point in the race. He had that fresh, brand new set of mediums, which Verstappen didn't, and that gave him the edge. And all of these things should have combined in making a smooth and clean overtake for Norris. And I've seen nobody speak about how Norris came absolutely out of control in that turn for one particular move that he tried to make. And Verstappen was clearly looking in his mirrors and was like, you're not making this corner. I'm turning out of the corner and letting you go straight on. Now, if Verstappen doesn't do that, Norris smashes into Verstappen and gets a penalty. Why is nobody talking about that? That shows to me a driver who's now gotten to the point where he's lacking self-confidence and the self-belief to make an overtake on a three-time world champion. And he's becoming desperate in his moves. Now, even though Leclerc has never won a world title, he will never have that issue of having a lack of self-confidence. And not only that, these two have raced throughout the junior categories all the way through into their karting days when they were youngsters. So they've grown up and are super familiar with one another. But regardless of all of that, Norris still has a lot to learn. And I think he personally, while he's got super speed, he's fantastic to drive a car. His wheel-to-wheel racing, at least with Verstappen on the evidence we've seen, is just not up to scratch. And I personally believe, and he might be doing this for all I know, he needs like a personal mentor, a trainer, which is like there for the psychological aspect of it. If I'm not mistaken, Nico Rosberg did something very similar to that when he's going up against Lewis Hamilton during their hugely personal duels during that hybrid era from 2014 to 2016. Norris has to do that, I think. But yeah, those are my opinions on the whole matter, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a like, subscribe down below, and I'll see you all later this week for all the latest upgrades brought to Silverstone by all the Formula 1 teams.